What's up, Misfitians? Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk with all of you about the day I decided to fail. And yes, today I am purposely setting myself up for failure. So let's go ahead and begin, shall we? So today I'm going to be setting myself up for failure in 5 ways, and I'm going to list those on the screen right now. Now, all of these reasons I have heard people say, I can't learn watercolor or I'm not good at watercolor because of this. And usually it's one of these 5 reasons. So why am I purposely setting myself up for failure? Well, the first reason is because I want to show you that every artist, I don't care if you're a noob or you're a professional or somewhere in between, you are going to have a bad day, no matter what. And I have those very often, actually. So that's the first thing that I want to kind of show you, that even though I'm doing some of these things, such as using the wrong paper, and I usually use the right paper, I can have some of these other mistakes happen to me all the time, such as no wait time, or too much water, or too little water. These things happen to me, and I want you to see that as an artist, you have these things happen to you no matter your skill level or where you are in your art journey. The second reason is because I want to challenge the idea of what failure actually is. Why is failure such a bad thing? I mean, failure is inevitable. No matter how you slice it, failure will happen, whether you are a pro or a noob. You are going to fail. The second reason why I don't feel like failure is truly such a bad thing is because actually the more failure you have, the more success you're going to have. It sounds really strange, especially in our culture, where everything needs to be perfect the first time around. But if you think about it, if you are failing, then that means ultimately you are trying. And not only trying, but you're also learning. Which brings me to my next point. Failure is temporary. You can't be bad at something forever. The point is, the more you try something, the more your brain is actually going to work out the kinks and figure out a new and better way to accomplish this task. So what am I getting at? Well, ultimately, the only true failure is if you don't try at all, because every accomplishment first starts with the decision to at least try. Now, that being said, through my failures, I have learned to look at these hindrances that I encountered today in different ways, such as when I knew that I would be using Bristol paper, even though it's a thick paper, it's super smooth, it has no texture to it, and it can also warp pretty easily. So because I knew that might be a failure for me, I used masking tape and a board to make sure it was very taut and it would not warp underneath pressure. Another thing that I did is I used pretty much all wet and wet technique, because I knew that since it was a smooth surface, it would create really cool effects if I didn't push it past its limits. Another thing that I knew was I would be using student grade paint, which student grade paint isn't always as vibrant, and also it can have some weird kind of texture to it at times, which this particular paint did do for me. So I knew that I would need to use a palette that would have wells in it where I could create mixtures that were more of an inky texture with the correct paint and water ratio already pre-mixed up for me, so I could get those bright, vivid colors from these student grade paints. But also, you probably noticed I use salt, and I use salt to kind of mask where you would get those grainy kind of weird little textures that come from just the glue that's holding that paint together. Another way that I took kind of a failure that I could run into basically and turned it on its head was using wet and wet techniques and pushing it way beyond what the paper could really handle. And the way I would solve that potential failure is by using Q-tips, dry brushes, pipettes, and basically anything that I could use to absorb extra water. And salt is another thing that can actually absorb extra water and create those really cool textures. Now, someone asked in the last video, and I thought it was a good point, why are you using a pipette? Why not just use a dry brush? It does the same thing, and just use that. That's the simplest way to do it. And it is true that a dry brush actually does work better in absorbing the paint, but the reason why I absolutely love a pipette is because I can move the paint, which I can't do with a dry brush. Once your paint is absorbed into the dry brush, you can't move it. You can't put it in another area, and it definitely won't, when you do touch the paper, it won't come out the same way it would on a pipette. So that is one reason why I use a pipette. I've started using that for the past 2 months and I've really enjoyed it. So that's a little tidbit for you of why I use pipettes. Now, another way that could be a potential failure is not having enough water. And this is actually a good problem to have, because if you put paint down and you realize, oh, this is too pasty basically of a feeling, you can either pick it back up, or sometimes what I like to do is actually take my pipette or take a brush, a wet brush, and just place water right on top of it, and the paint is going to move, since it's watercolor, with your water wherever it goes. So it can create these really cool like wash techniques, and you couldn't really get that if you just placed water and then paint. It's a completely different technique. So what I'm trying to say is, when you're faced with a failure, think creatively of how you could fix it, and then in the future you will have kind of that arsenal of creative ways to fix those issues and know immediately how to do it. The only reason why I know how to fix these quote-unquote failures is because I ran into them and I thought creatively how to fix them at that moment. So technically they weren't failures, they were just ways to learn and to think outside the box while you're painting in the moment. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button. Also make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. That's a second notification to let you know when I upload videos on this channel, and if I upload any special videos which might come up in the future. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this once again, and I will see you next time.